Good evening and welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. This evening we have, as I mentioned at the outset, we have Texas State Senator Bob Hall calling in. I believe we have him on the line. Hello, sir.
Well, hello, Debbie. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, great to have you. Thank you. You know, the reason I wanted to talk with you tonight, I have talked about this issue in little pieces, but I want to just give the smallest introduction to it and then let you tell us about, because you are an expert based on your life experience and also as a Texas senator. But we've had in the show also a guest named Frank Gaffney, and he is the founder and head of the Center for Security Policy in Washington. And he is all about protecting America from threats of all kind. He specifically focuses quite a bit on jihadic or Islamic terrorism, but he also introduced me to the idea of the electromagnetic pulse, or the idea that if you're an enemy of America and you want to just bring our country to a screeching halt, if you could impact the electric grid, if you could take it out, then just think of the disaster you could cause. And so here in America, we have largely almost the entire country on electric grid. Texas has its own grid, our own grid, which is kind of a wonderful thing about Texas. But I want to start with Senator Hall, because you look at this so much and know so much about it. Is it extreme to say that if we had the electric grid taken out, what's the outcome? What's the consequence? I mean, how bad could that be?
Well, Debbie, it is absolutely the worst thing that could happen to America. If you take a look at the importance of electricity today in our lives, it's the third most important element of living. First, there's air. You can only live for a few seconds without air. You can live for a few days without water. But you will live longer without food than you will, many people will live longer without food than they will electricity, because electricity is at the heart of everything that we do. There is hardly any item we have in the house or any part of our commercial life that is not dependent on electricity. And we're not talking about just a little bit of electricity being gone out in selective areas for a while. We're talking about as a result of an electromagnetic pulse weapon attack on the United States, which could be accomplished with a single small nuclear weapon detonated 200 miles above the Earth's surface. We could wipe out almost all of the electrical services in the United States. And the condition of wiping them out means that it would be damaged beyond repair, so that America would essentially be pushed back into the early 1800s, pre-electricity days. There would be no pumps running to pump water, pump gasoline, no trucks running to deliver food. The list goes on. If it just say if it has any electrical component to it, it won't work. So it doesn't get any more serious than that. And the other part about the seriousness is it's probably the easiest and cheapest way to attack the United States and render it absolutely helpless. It doesn't take an army. It simply takes a few people, a short-range, medium-range missile, and one nuclear weapon. Could easily be launched off the back of a cargo ship from either the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic coast, or the Pacific coast. All it needs to do is reach somewhere over the central part of the United States and be detonated. One-time event, and electricity as we know it today would no longer exist in the United States.
Okay, you've already got our attention, of course, but I will say, I have heard this. I've actually watched a video, I believe was produced by the Heritage Foundation, or perhaps it was by Center for Security Policy, but I'd never thought through the ramifications, just as you just touched the surface of them, of not having electricity, because I think people think, okay, well, it's kind of like we're camping for the weekend. We go camping, we don't have electricity. And for many years on the planet Earth, for millennia on the planet Earth, we didn't have electricity. But our today's society is so dependent on it. And things like, for example, you think, well, if I run out of supplies at home, I'll go to the grocery store. So, okay, but the grocery store shelves are only stocked because trucks can drive and they can bring food to the stores, and trucks can only drive if electricity exists to pump gas into their gas tanks. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you just don't think through initially when you think about losing electricity. Are there any more I really want to be sure we've painted a clear enough picture. I agree it's catastrophic, but what would be, would people ultimately we'd be unable to, I know in the winter we would freeze, in the summer we'd be way hotter than we like, but we'd also be unable to get access to supplies. Is that the biggest problem?
Oh, absolutely. People would essentially exist on what they have in their homes. Unfortunately, the big impact is our society today. Most people don't know how to have a garden or plant a garden or prepared to plant one, and so most people don't have water stored. So unless you happen to have a pond nearby, the water will not be accessible even from wells because you won't have electricity to pump from them. Fuel would not be available. There's no way to pump fuel out. And vehicles, most modern vehicles would be rendered inoperable because they have electronic ignition. So even if you had fuel for them, they wouldn't run. Automobiles built before about 1974 and early model tractors and some older riding lawnmowers might operate, but that's about it. So it would be what's on the shelves in the grocery store you could walk to, or what you have in your cupboard that you would have to exist on.
Okay. Well, so I'm so glad that it's not just you. There are, or not just Frank Gaffney, there are many people in the national security industry talking about, how to defend ourselves against this potential attack on the electric grid. And as I said in the start, Texas is unique in that we have our own electric grid, separate from the rest of the country. So is there a way to protect our grid from this potential attack?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We can protect our grid. We probably will not get to the point where the lights don't go out for a little while, but what we need is protection so we can recover from an attack. Right now, we could not recover from one, but we need to get to the point where we could recover from an attack, and it may take a week or two or maybe even a month. But that's a whole lot better than 12 to 13 months, because they estimate if we're without power in the United States for 12 months, we will lose 90+% of the population. But it can be done. The reason it's not being done is the power companies refuse to accept the threat as real. And my personal opinion is that we have power companies that are run by executives who are more concerned about getting their paycheck and their bonuses each month than they are about protecting the American people.
Well, on that subject, so in Texas, we have our own grid. We have power companies here obviously using it. So the Texas legislature could pass laws essentially requiring the electric companies to put in place whatever protection it is we need so that the grid can function. Wouldn't that be the easiest step?
Well, you're absolutely right. That is a step that we could take. I was in hopes in this past session that discussions with the power companies that they would step up and recognize this threat and their responsibility as in the role they have to take the necessary steps that we know that can be taken, and only bring the legislature in if it's impossible. They would refuse to do it. Well, we found that they were basically they were refusing to do it, and so we attempted to get some legislation passed, but they are a very strong, powerful lobby, and they did their arm twisting, and the power companies, through their lobbying efforts, stopped the bill that we had that would have started us on a path of having our grid protected.
Is there some way you can estimate in a meaningful way for our listeners the cost the power companies would incur by having to build the whole protection for the grid themselves?
Well, the cost will vary depending on the level of protection and the time for recovery. But I will say that it is not very much money. Actually, the power companies have wasted more money on smart meters than what it would cost us to protect the grid.
That's a great data point. They have wasted more money on smart meters than they would have had to spend to protect the grid. So, I have to say, what you described is obviously so alarming if it were to occur. And after it happened, if it were ever happened, we'd have everyone looking around each other saying, why didn't we know about this? Why didn't we stop this? I'm kind of floored that the power companies don't want to they don't want to be responsible for this. Maybe they just see it as such a doomsday scenario that if this happens, hey, it's all over anyway. Is that what they're thinking?
Well, I think so. I think you could compare it to the Ford Motor Company's Pinto case and the more recent General Motors Switch case. Is they understand the threat, they know the threat is real, and they're willing to accept the consequences rather than pay the price to fix it. I think the power companies feel that if it were to occur, that it would be so catastrophic that there will be nobody around to prosecute them, and therefore they would it would just be everybody loses, and therefore they would not. Because my feeling is that it's my opinion that by them not doing this, they are as criminally negligent in their role in protecting the people as General Motors was with the switch, and as I believe they found Ford Motor Company was
with the Pinto. You know, and Anita Jump, who we're speaking tonight was Texas State Senator Bob Hall. We're up against a break, but I know I asked you can hold on during the break. We'll come back right after our break. I want to finish up about the U.S. grid, and then we'll come back and touch on a couple other issues. So this is Debbie Georgatos on Ladies Can We Talk on 660 AM The Answer. Please come back after the break. We'll continue talking with Texas State Senator Bob Hall.
Back to Ladies Can We Talk with Debbie Georgatos on 660 AM The Answer.
Welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. This is Debbie Georgatos. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're continuing our conversation tonight with Texas State Senator Bob Hall, who happens to be a friend, but he's also among the most outspoken and just really strong conservatives in the entire Texas State Senate, and is a leader on very serious issues. We were talking before the break about the catastrophic possibility if an enemy of America were to launch a nuclear weapon of some kind, some weapon, and ultimately destroy the electric grid. And we were talking about how Texas has its own grid, and efforts in the Texas legislature to push something through to require the electric companies to build the protection that the grid needs did not go anywhere. So I guess I want to talk about a whole other issue in a moment, but I want to finish on this grid thing. So if you're listening to this, if whoever's listening to the show tonight, Bob, wouldn't it be wise to have our voters get a hold of their own Texas state reps and state senators and say, I want you to do something about the grid?
Absolutely. That's one of two things that I think that would be very helpful in moving this forward, is for people to contact their rep, contact their senator, tell them that they are very concerned about the security of the Texas electrical grid, and ask them to support action to secure the grid. The other thing to do is to call their power company, whoever's providing them electrical power, and demand to know why they refuse to take action on it. And I think that if we bring enough public pressure and shine the light very brightly on the fact that this is not happening because the executives of the power companies are more concerned about protecting their own personal paycheck than they are about protecting the people of Texas. They don't want that kind of exposure. So I would urge the people to call their power company as well as their legislators.
That's a very, very good point. And, I know there is a group called Secure the Grid. I think it's a website, securethegrid.org.com. Yeah. Look at that, too. It might give you other ideas of things to say and understand the issue better. So I really thank you for raising it. And I want to do one more thing in the grid, which is, so Texas has its own. We could smarten up and protect our grid. But on the national level, the federal level in Washington, Congress could take action and as yet has not. And is it accurate the United States, the whole rest of the country, is run on two other grids? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a big integrated grid that could be divided into two parts, and Texas stands alone. The really great part is Texas's grid is isolated. We could protect, in fact, we are not under the same regulations as the rest of the country. So we can take our own action. We can, without any federal approval, move out and protect our grid. There's a federal involvement in the other states. So Texas is in an excellent position to take care of itself.
I love it. It sounds just like Texas should be. And I will just tell our listeners there is an effort on the federal level to push a Secure the Grid bill, and I would urge you also to tell your congressman you want them to do that. It's one of those things I honestly have heard some of the people in the American left refer to this as, oh, come on, this is kind of, tinfoil hat concerns. That's never going to happen. Well, many evil things in history people thought would never happen, including the bombing of in Pearl Harbor, the attack at Pearl Harbor, all sorts of things. Only after it's over do we say, shoot, we should have done something. So I think it's just an important issue. If you're listening to this radio show from Alaska, Maine, or wherever you are, this is an important issue to understand for your state and for America's future. Okay, so we're speaking with Texas Senator Bob Hall, and I want to switch topics because I'm so excited to have you on, and you're a fountain of knowledge on so many things. So here in the great state of Texas, we have a large number of toll roads, and we have Texas transportation policy is constantly an issue of controversy in Texas. How to fund? We need to expand our roads. We have everybody who's ever driven on some of the Texas freeways knows that we need more roads, and so there is an idea being floated. And honestly, when you were talking to me about this, Senator Hall, I was going to make a joke about, gee, you sound like a liberal, like a free lunch liberal, because you were saying we can build all the roads we need without having tolls. And that sounds really good to me, because tolls have a lot of political repercussions. It makes it so that only rich people can drive, or it's easier for rich people to drive. But what is I know you've given so much thought to this. Do you have in mind what we should do in Texas to expand and fill out our needed roadways without adding more toll roads?
Oh, absolutely. We tried to get a bill through this past session, but one of the things I found is that new ideas are very difficult to sell during the session down there. So we'll be working on the interim. But what we found is that the cost of toll roads are astronomical for the people. And maybe on another time we can talk about the link between toll roads and Agenda 21,
yes,
which
sir.
is very, very real. But when we build a toll road, it costs the people of Texas somewhere between 3 and 4 times as much as if we were just to build that same road with the same capacity as a free road, because we get people involved between the money that's borrowed, the interest rate, and the equipment that's put on it, the cost of collection, the cost of selling the concession to an entity to build the road. All these things get built into the cost of what people pay in order to use that road, so that we could build 3 to 4 times the number of roads that we have for the same amount of money. So we've done the analysis, and they're very confident of that figure. The other thing that comes up is a question, well, we don't have the cash. Well, in quick summary, a road that we were going to build as a toll road between 2 points, let's say it was going to be $1 billion road. By the time we finish building that road and collecting the money to pay off the bonds that are on it and all like that, the people will have paid $1.9 billion. If we took that exact same road and just built it for cash, like we run our families, we don't do it with the credit card with minimum payments. We pay cash, but we could build that same road and have people driving on it at no additional charge for $600 million. The amount of money that's paid to these concessionaires is just astronomical. The amount of administration support that goes into it is extremely high. And a concept that we've come up with that was put forth by a couple of my colleagues in concept, and we kind of took it and ran with it, is that rather if we have to borrow money, if it comes down to there's just absolutely you have to borrow some, well, we borrow it as a based on the economic growth that's going to occur when the road is put in. That is, we found that the economy on either side of a freeway that has service roads really grows rapidly and very well on about a stretch of about 1 to 2 miles on either side of the road. If we were just to take the incremental increase in sales tax, which we already have a mechanism for collecting the sales tax, but we just take off the incremental increase of the state's portion of the sales tax growth that goes to a road and use that to pay off a bond that was used to build a road, it could be done very quickly, very cheaply, and be done without getting involved in all the extra expense of a toll road.
Senator Hall, we're speaking this evening with Texas State Senator Bob Hall. Senator Hall, are the numbers and the thinking, the formulations that you were describing just now, are they available, accessible for citizens to see? Because honestly, it sounds irrefutably a far better plan, but it's almost, I can see people imagine having the reaction, is this too good to be true? So are the numbers available somewhere for people to see?
We're working, we've put this in as an interim study with the legislature. I feel I can't speak for our lieutenant governor. He gets to make the decisions on what will be studied, but we will be studying it in one way or another and formulating a report by the time the session starts next session, and hopefully before that to lay out all of these numbers. And I really want to do this because these roads, as you mentioned, are becoming roads for the elite. They're planning on these, particularly the managed lanes. the purpose of managed lanes is to push people off of the interstate, to make it expensive for them to drive so fewer people will drive on it. And in today's world, a worker that has to take that toll road to and from work, the average cost is $5 each way. The lifetime cost to the family of that worker is over $135,000 in tolls.
Oh, my gosh.
Just for the privilege of driving on the road.
You know what? I am amazed by that number. We're speaking with Texas State Senator Bob Hall. We have just about 1 minute left in this segment, and I do, before we go to our top of the hour break and then come back in the second hour, the leading ladies, Lori Medina and Dorinda Randall. I want to ask you very quickly in this less than 30 seconds, there is a Proposition 7 on the Texas state ballot this coming November. I think it's November 3rd is Election Day. And it relates to toll roads, I believe. So what did you have a quick opinion on that?
Oh, absolutely. We need to pass that because the money that's in Proposition 7 is prohibited from being used for toll roads. It will move us forward in with more free roads. So I would urge everyone, while it's not the ideal way to fund roads, it is better than what we're doing now, so I would urge everyone to vote for that proposition. It will put a significant amount of money into the road building that cannot be used for toll roads. It's going to force these MPOs, the regional transportation commissions who have pushed us into toll roads. It will help stop them from continuing this practice of building everything as a toll road.
Thank you so very much. We're speaking with Texas State Senator Bob Hall. Thank you, sir, for calling in. This is Debbie Georgatos and Ladies Can We Talk on 660 AM The Answer. Come on back after the top of the hour, and we have a whole great next hour left to talk with you about the greatness of America.